online, because I know there are quite a few of you, please indicate in the chat your name and outlet and that you have a question. Make sure that the chat, your message is addressed to everyone. And then I'll give some questions to the floor, and then we'll go online. Thank you. Mr. Alakbarov, please.
Thank you very much. Am I audible? Yeah, thank you. It's first of all, thank you for having me. I know it was not planned to meet today, and it's not a very happy occasion, of course, on a very happy topic which we're discussing. But it's a change for me to see you all face to face, because we usually interact in an online format. And obviously you have seen the statement which was issued by the principals of the Interagency Standing Committee on Afghanistan. And let me make it very clear that United Nations and humanitarian partners are very committed to delivery of the life-saving services to the people of Afghanistan. It's one of the very probably the most difficult circumstances which I have seen in my 30-year career with UN. Humanitarian needs of the people are absolutely enormous, and it's important that we continue to stay and deliver. As we do so, it's equally important that the rights of women and girls, of which we are so much talking these days, are absolutely preserved and protected, and they are an important element, undeniable element of the humanitarian action. We do not believe that it is possible to deliver a comprehensive humanitarian action without participation of women, and that's why the statement was issued. That's why we are actively working with interlocutors on the ground to find solution to this current situation, and that we are engaging with the authorities. The UN Emergency and Relief Coordinator will conduct a visit to Afghanistan. There will be several other visits which we are planning to make at the senior level in order to prevail upon the interlocutors on the de facto authorities side to resolve this situation. And this will be taking place in the course of the few coming weeks as we are assessing the implications of what is happening. And there is already an impact, because by introducing the ban, certain activities had to be paused because of the impact of what is happening on the actual programs. To give you an idea, nearly 70% of our programs are implemented in partnerships with non-government organizations or international or national organizations, and obviously those programs are all impacted, some of them fully, some of them partially, and I'm ready to answer any questions which you have in this regard. Commitment which we have is very strong to Afghanistan. We are committed to stay and deliver, we are committed to the people, and we are committed to the gender equality and protecting the rights of women and girls. So thank you so much.
Okay, great. We'll start. Michelle, Reuters, please.
Thank you. On behalf of the UN correspondents, thanks for being here and doing this briefing. Sorry, just to clarify straight up, you said Martin Griffiths will do a visit to Afghanistan in the coming weeks?
We're expecting, yeah, we're planning to organize a visit. Yeah.
And do you know who he'll meet with yet?
We obviously will seek to meet the highest possible authorities, and we will we have already engaged with all of them at the highest levels, which we can attain in order to discuss those.
And just a couple of sort of specific questions on mainly the order that came. Obviously, there was the university announcement as well last week, but the order as well on Saturday on the aid workers. Where do you know who in the Taliban that came down from, and did any Taliban officials give you any indication as to whether it was in response to something specific?
Most of those decrees which we receive are associated with cabinet decisions. Usually those are sent to us from Kandahar. That's where the meetings are taking place. Some of the recent decrees also were signed by the ministers, which are based in Kabul, but they're referring to the Kandahar Shura.
And did they say whether it was in response to anything that had happened, sort of globally or internationally?
Not necessarily. The only references which I have seen in those communications which we have received refer to the observance of hijab.
Okay. And
Michelle,
oh, sorry.
we'll come back to you.
Okay.
Ibtisam?
Thank you. My name is Ibtisam Azim from Al Arabi Al Jadid newspaper. I have two questions. You said in your opening remarks that you are working on finding a solution for the current situation. So could you elaborate on that, to whom you are talking, what you are doing also? Is this also connected to your visit to New York? And my second question is, if you could walk us through how women, or how is this decision, not only the latest one, but also related decisions, impact the daily life of Afghani women, and do you see different implications in different areas? Thank you.
Sure. First of all, just can you repeat the first question, because I didn't get the.
The first question is, you said that you are working on finding solution to the current situation. So.
Yes, sure. So what is happening is that we have put a series of requests to meet with the de facto officials. Specifically, for instance, we had meetings with the de facto Minister of Health, Minister of Refugees and Repatriation. Every day our teams are meeting with individual ministries to discuss how the programs in each individual sector. I personally met with the Minister of Economy as well, how the programs in that sector are impacted by the ban, and what are the particular concerns which they have and how we can resolve them. For instance, my team had a rather constructive meeting with the Minister of Health, and obviously delivery of health services to women and girls will not be possible without health medical personnel. So we already had an agreement with the minister that in that sector there should not be a barrier, and that the service providers may return to work. Now let's see how this is going to play out and in which format it will take place. The discussions with the other line ministries have not yielded the same results yet, but they are ongoing. The most important element also is to explain what these consequences mean. And you asked for the specific examples. I will give you a very specific example. So when, for instance, a team is going to do an assessment for the needs in a village, it needs to include both men and women, because there are men and women in the society. And as we approach a conservative society, religious society, you obviously need women to speak to the women to understand what are their particular needs, be it related to nutrition, be it related to health services, water and sanitation or hygiene. So then women are not able to participate in such an assessment. You cannot then conclude a comprehensive program, and then your ability to launch a new program is significantly handicapped. So you're not able to basically launch a new program. And that's one of the issues which we'll be facing now. Launching new programs will be practically impossible in this environment. That's number one. Number two, when the needs of the women are not assessed, then correspondingly the aid will not be reaching those needy women, and they will not be able to receive, let's say, food or, and I do hope that we continue to maintain, of course, the food supplies and everything, and these are the most essential life-saving activities which we maintain. That's the food and the health services. But beyond that, there is a livelihood activities. There is, let's say, activities related to creation of employment. There is a gardening activities. So the whole gamut associated with it is very important. Specific issues is, of course, the protection, particularly for those vulnerable women which need protection services. Again, lack of participation of female staff in such a program will not allow them to benefit. In general, more than 28 million people in Afghanistan need aid, and our focus right now is to make sure that we resolve the bottlenecks so that we can address their needs as systematically as we can.
Okay, Kirsten and then Deji.
Thank you. So will you attempt to continue, I believe you're saying you'll attempt to continue to provide aid even without women working, or is it an all or nothing approach that the women have to be part of this delivery of services in order for the UN to continue its work? Thanks.
Let's be very clear. There are And you're talking about a very core of the matter, the very contradiction point. Aid is never conditional. You cannot condition providing food or assistance, health assistance to a starving person or a dying person because of any condition. That's an important element of aid. And an important element of aid is that you cannot exclude one gender or any particular category of people out of it. And that's where the dilemma of this situation is, and that's where we find ourselves in. And that's why we're working on the solution to this problem. And that's then an absolute requirement that we get to address the needs of women and girls, and we make sure that there is an adequate participation of them in provision of those services. That's why we need this period of time to engage proactively, explain the consequences, and work on the solution. I hope I explain our position.
Okay, Taji?
Hi, Mr. Alakbarov. This is Deji Shui with China Central Television. Basically, I have two questions. First one is very similar to what Christine just asked. Given the fact that this ban has already had a impact or potential impact on your work, in the worst scenario, has the UN local team be ready for that impact, or what have you prepared for the coming situation with that ban? And second, I just want to know what do you expect the international community to engage with the Taliban to reverse this decision for this?
Thank you very much. Let me start from the last and come to the first. I think engagement of all partners and all international community in the dialogue with the Taliban is important in order to convey the messages which we all talk about today. And that is that women and girls are absolutely essential members of the society, and their needs have to be made. And the current policies which have been introduced, which are pushing them out of the public life and getting all those restrictions, will not result in any productive outcomes, neither for the economy, neither for the social life, or any other aspects of the future of Afghanistan. We've been very clear about that. So the engagement is necessary. Sustained engagement is necessary, sustained dialogue is necessary, both at the regional level, and we have seen also statements of the Security Council and our member states. That needs to continue. There's no alternative to the dialogue.
But for that one, may I ask, do you have any advice or suggestions for international communities to engage more effectively on this issue with Taliban?
I think we have a perspective of working more closely with the issues of economic life. And I think economic situation and specific attention to the issues of economic activities of women and girls is extremely important. And by the way, working in the NGO sector is one of the largest employment sectors for the women in Afghanistan. And I'm not sure that when the decisions which were made or discussions which took place about the banning of women from working in the NGOs have actually factored in the numbers of women working in the NGO sector. And they're actually, in many cases, are the only breadwinners for the families. So I believe the economic issues and the issues of the well-being of the people in Afghanistan, and specifically of women and girls, are extremely important. With regard to to what United Nations does in order to prepare itself for various situations, of course, we have all sorts of contingency plans. But our major goal of all of our contingency plan at any given time are the best interests of the people of Afghanistan. So whatever we do, whatever we plan, is to make sure that we provide support to the people as much as they can, because this is one of the, if not the poorest, is one of the poorest countries in the world. So this is what we are aiming at. And as we do so, we regret to see that there is already an impact of this decision on our programs. And if the programs cannot be implemented or the programs cannot take place, there are immediate effects of it. there will be less cash available for the implementation of the programs. There is less people which you can reach, and there will be less opportunities on the economic and livelihood side as the result of the fact that we have been put in this condition, not because we have asked for it or because we implemented it, because this ban has created those conditions, which we would like to be removed so that the obstacles for the implementation of those programs can be eliminated for us to be able to realize those type of assistances, and as soon as possible.
Okay, we'll go over here, then I will take a question online.
Thank you. Ghazal Vaisi with Independent Persian. In your meeting on Monday with the Taliban's Minister of Economy, Mohammad Hanif, you called for a reversal of the ban on female employees from working in NGOs. And what was his response? And to do with the economy, considering the fact that banning women from working and studying, the Taliban is essentially wiping out half of the economy and half of the GDP with that, especially at a time when Afghanistan needs the economic help. As the Minister of the Economy, is he at all concerned about the economic fallout of this decision and ban?
Well, in my interaction, I think we had quite a clear understanding. I do believe the de facto minister does understand that women have an extremely important role in the economic life of the country. So that definitely, that understanding was there. I believe that the concerns which you're referring to there, again, I already voiced that. What I heard from the de facto authorities out there were concerns about the observance of the Muslim traditions of the hijab. Now, those concerns could be addressed. Yeah, and we have many examples of Muslim societies around the world. The people do observe hijab and they do observe the traditions and customs, but that does not necessarily mean that the person cannot work or cannot study or cannot exercise in all aspects of life. So this is a very consecutive number of announcements which we have seen from the de facto authorities, from banning the parks and public appearances first, and then there is the ban on the schools which came before this, and so forth. So this is a complexity of the whole issues related exactly to the gender equality and participation of women in the society in this country, and the ideology which obviously underpins the actions of the de facto authorities of Afghanistan. Now, I would say I have left the meeting with an impression that there is a dialogue and that we will be dialoguing about that, but I also left the meeting with a clear message that for us to be able to deliver and to engage in the same forward, we need to address those barriers. And that's in the coming weeks, we will be working on addressing those barriers and keeping you closely informed of the progress which we will be making.
Thank you. I'm going to take one question online. We're coming back to you, Michelle. Haven't forgotten you. So Saeed Shah from the Wall Street Journal, if you're there, please open up your mic.
Hello, hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Hi, Ramiz. I just wanted to get a little more understanding from you about how the UN is in a slightly different position from some of the aid groups that have already announced that they've had to cease activities. What is the UN thinking in terms of time frame in order to get this ban reversed? And then if the UN does have to cease its humanitarian activities, what would that mean for the people of Afghanistan?
Thank you very much, Sid, and and sorry I couldn't get back to you on your inquiry earlier. I was traveling to get to New York, and that was the delay. But we spoke a couple of days before, and to come back to this series of questions, for us, an absolute importance is that we should never talk about stopping any humanitarian assistance to the people of Afghanistan. That's a last resort, which we will never enforce. But if we are put in that condition, and only then that will happen. Let's be very, very, very clear. The people of Afghanistan, those who are on the taking side, have nothing to do with this situation. And we need to focus on finding the solutions. Now, finding the solutions, of course, UN has a convening power. UN has the responsibility to protect, and we have the largest footprint and presence in the country, and they're the major interlocutor with the de facto authorities and the entire gamut of the partners at the global and regional level. So what we are seeking to do right now is to have very specific discussions on how to resolve this bottleneck and how to make sure that female participation in the humanitarian action and is providing in essential life-saving activities is restored, and how we can get there. So that's our immediate objective, and that's what we'll be focusing on in the next in the course of the January, and with the hope that we can resolve this. In the meantime, the program's been already impacted. There is already a situation which has been created by the ban, which is beyond our control or beyond the fact that we are acting on it. It's a result of the actions of our de facto authorities. Thank you.
I'm going to take a couple more questions online. I'm conscious of the time. Mariam Rahmati from Afghanistan International.
Hi, thank you so much for taking my question and for this briefing. The UNICEF stopped some of the program in Kandahar, which affected 54,000 students already. Can you confirm that? And if that is the case, do you think there are going to be more education programs going to be stopped in the future? And also, I have another question. You talked about the necessity of dialogues with the Taliban. As you know, the Taliban did promise to respect women's rights to work and education in Doha, but they haven't delivered on whatever they promised the international community. And whatever decisions that they made, it's made by the leader of the Taliban. What would be the plan B if the dialogue doesn't work with the Taliban? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. United Nations has been created to build peace and to provide humanitarian assistance to the people around the globe. And that's what United Nations does. We facilitate dialogue, we engage in dialogue, and we provide aid. These are the tools which are in possession of the United Nations. Yeah? Of course, there are political structures within the UN. There is a UN Security Council, there is which already issued its statement and which is looking, if you wish, at the political aspects and other aspects of that work. So for us and for the arm of the UN which I represent, what we facilitate is the dialogue, and we will be engaged in that dialogue at all times, because that's what is necessary, and we will be extending our support to the people of Afghanistan to the extent possible. But that assistance will not be delivered in a place and a space where operational independence, impartiality, or any other operating principles of UN are compromised. It can't be. And this is not just because it's Afghanistan, it is because this is universal. There are many other countries. I worked in UN for 30 years. Being a humanitarian means that you're a humanitarian. You engage and you in dialogue and you provide aid regardless of whether you like or you don't like what is happening on the ground, because your key purpose is to assist the people. However, if the principles of the independence and if the principles of impartiality or any other principles, or if there's interferences which have taken place, are taking place, then that impedes our ability to deliver. Right now, we're not in the situation where we cannot deliver assistance, life-saving essential assistance in Afghanistan. We still can. But it has been compromised because of the decision which has been made, and we're seeking to reverse that decision and to create the conditions in which we can deliver the service. The impact is already there. You're absolutely right. I cannot give you a full inventory because we're just trying to understand what that means. This happened over the course of the last few days. But obviously, as you know, for instance, we provide education services. Also, as you know, there is a cash line of support to the country, which is basically we are bringing a certain amount of financial resources every month to support the implementation. Now, the number of requests for these supplies in January already have been reduced, because if organization cannot implement the program, it will not ask for certain supplies and it may not come. But this is, again, not the result of us taking that deliberate action. It is the result of the operational impact which is taking place because of the restrictions which are being imposed on the implementing partner. So I cannot tell you right now in figures, but in 1 month from now we will know, and hopefully, the required steps will be taken to correct this situation.
Thank you. I will now go to Jennifer Peltz, AP, and then we'll come back here in the room to Frank.
Thanks very much. Since the topic of your meeting the other day with the economy minister came up, I wanted to ask whether you got any solid sense of what the minister feels needs to happen in order for women to return to NGO workplaces, and also what you think is or might be the Taliban's endgame where women's rights and freedoms are concerned.
Thank you very much. If you want to go back to my meeting with the Minister of Economy, I think his focus was on observation of the Muslim traditions and Islamic law, the Sharia and the dress codes and those elements in the interpretation which the Taliban movement gives to the Sharia and to the way this is being interpreted. As you know, the Islamic law consists of the certain elements. One of it is the Sharia, one of it is also urf, which refers to the tradition. So that not necessarily is, if you wish, what is written in the Sharia or what is written in the books of how the people are supposed to dress or behave, but also what is the cultural tradition, which is a part of the Hanafi interpretation, and that what he was talking about, not just about the Islamic way of looking at it, but also about the Afghan culture and tradition. So that was in focus of his comments, along with importance which needs to be paid to the economic participation of women in life, because I think there is a hefty level of understanding of the economic impact of what this ban implies. So that was the first part of your question. The second part of your question, you are asking me to comment about what Taliban's vision is. I would say that the vision of the Taliban is very well expressed in the type of actions and the announcements which have been recently made, and they're quite public and known. So I'm not going to make any further comments on it, because I think you've seen what's been announced: ban on school, ban on university, don't come to work, and things like that. But also there are different interpretations within the movement, if you wish. Being in Afghanistan, living in Afghanistan, I have seen people who are a more forward-leaning, if you wish, and who have a more backward interpretations of it. As overall, the bottom line of these discussions so far has been that they all this come to a kind of a more conservative position. That has been so far my personal observation of the interactions sorry, which have taken place until now. I do hope that tendency will revert, and we will continue with our advocacy effort. Important that the countries of the region, that in the Islamic world also continues to talk. We have seen, for instance, the statement from the leadership of Al-Azhar University and many other Muslim clerics and known personalities from around the globe who have spoken about this matter. I don't think I have any further comment to add to this.
Great. Frank, and then Michelle again.
Thank you for having this meeting. Frank Ishiardo from TR2 World. I wanted to ask you about the foreign assets that have been frozen, roughly $7 billion by the U.S. and several more by United Arab Emirates. Do you believe that considering what is going on right now with the Taliban and their treatment of women and women's rights, do you believe they should unfreeze these assets?
Thank you very much. Issue of the assets is not something we necessarily deal with. If you want my comments on it, last year Secretary General has been very clear about this, that the combination of frozen temperatures and frozen assets doesn't make anything good for the economy. Now, the economic aspects of the frozen assets has nothing to do with the actual daily economic life of a person. This is not money which goes for aid, if you wish. This is money which is being used for macroeconomic stability, to maintain the exchange rate, to use the stability of economy, and so forth. Now, the direct question which you're asking again from me is whether because of the violation of the human rights or other things, someone has to return to the de facto authorities, the frozen assets, and so far, is beyond the competency of my purview. I'm a humanitarian and resident coordinator. I'm responsible for the aid sector. And in that capacity, I can only answer to you that this is between the member states, and this is a political question, okay? And I'm responsible for the aid sector, yes? Of course, if we would have had a functional banking system, the economic situation in the country would have been better, and as a consequence of it, women and girls or anybody who is living in that place probably would have had a better life. Does that mean that they would have had a better exercise of their human rights in this context? Specifically through being having more access to the gender equality or having a better participation? Absolutely not. I would not build any parallel between these two elements. I hope I expressed to you where I do see this equation sitting. Thank you.
Michelle?
Thanks for putting up with all these questions. A couple of quick, short ones, I promise, Florencia. Just to clarify what you were saying about the hijab and the reasons that the Taliban were giving for this ban on aid workers, do you see an opening, like, is it as simple as they don't think enough of the female aid workers are wearing the hijab, or is it more than that? And then I've got another question.
Well, yeah, should I answer this first, maybe? Okay, thank you so much. I have probably traveled to, I don't know, to a largest proportion of Afghanistan altogether. So then you go to the field, to the provinces, or when you go to the districts, or you go to the villages, trust me, the people are begging us for schools, including for boys and girls. And every community leader says there will never be a barrier for a girl to go to school or to any economic participation. So those perceptions and this question you're asking is changing from a place to go. There is a number of provinces in Afghanistan where the schools are still open, right? So what I'm trying to say here is this is a very different situation from one province to another province, even from a district to a district. Also, I've mentioned the cultural tradition. Afghanistan is a very diverse country. You have many tribes and many ethnicities. What is acceptable to a certain tribe or a certain ethnicity is not acceptable for the other one. So you're traveling to the area where the people are of a certain ethnicity or a certain tribe, and they have a different attitude about it. And in the Hanafi school of jurisprudence, it's recognized, because it is the urf, it's a cultural tradition of that ethnicity, or that tribe, or that place. So that's how it goes, yeah? So I'm not sure if I'm answering in sufficient level of granularity your question.
I guess to simplify it even more, is it, like, do you see an opening for getting them to reverse this decision? Or is it entrenched in they just don't think women should be working outside the home?
I think if you're talking about the central ideology, they have been quite rigid. If you're talking about the actual availability and what is happening in various places, it's very different.
And then just a couple of practical questions. Do you have any idea of sort of what percentage of the aid community is women working out there? And is there any division within the Taliban over these orders that you've noticed?
Of course, there are divisions. It depends. It's also generational. You know, the older generation of Taliban is more conservative. The younger ones are far more progressive, and that's just a very simple observation you can make. When it comes to, sorry, I'm starting to get a bit tired, so can you tell me what was the beginning of your question?
Sorry, just what percentage of the aid
What
workers
percentage?
are women?
Yeah. I would say we are talking about 30% of the, I would say roughly so. It depends, of course, on an organization, and they were there, for instance, focusing on female health, or I have an NGO, for instance, which employs 2,500 women. Yeah, and then maybe there is a perception that, and unfortunately happens in many societies, that if the women are not going to work, that men will come and replace them, and that unfortunately also is a very false calculation. And if anyone thinks that the aid community will replace the female workers with male workers, that ain't going to happen, simply because they are there not for the purpose of serving the male population. They are there to serve exactly the proportion of the population they're serving now. So this ain't going to happen, and we've been very clear in our messaging and in our meetings that if these jobs are lost, they're lost. They will not be replenished through recruitment of males. But in general, in Afghanistan, where the literacy rate is 50%, and which is a very traditional society, it has been historically not easy to recruit a qualified female staff. So we specifically created programs to train, to develop skills, and so forth. That's why we never had a gender parity, but we were working towards it. So about 30% of the staffing, I would say. Obviously, this also deteriorated after the August of 2021 for one single reason, that many educated women who were in working positions and who also had, let's say, financial means, they decided to leave the country because they didn't want to face exactly what it is they're facing. Just to add to this, another element, for instance, which, speaking of displacement, you know that Afghanistan is one of the most displaced nations in the world. And now that there's all this talk that one of the things which we have seen in the last year and a half is the relative peace in the country. And the fact that they could go everywhere, and they could be places and could visit every district which we couldn't visit before. So, and the de facto authorities have called for the returns, for the volunteer returns of the displaced to the country. Now, if you're returning from a country where you lived for another 10, 15 years or 5 years, and your children were able to go to school, and your daughter was able to go to university, would you bring back your family to your home country where these education opportunities do not exist? So those type of things are very important in the dialogue with the de facto authorities, also to explain the proportions of the employment, but also the cascade impact this has on the various aspects of life in Afghanistan.
And then just one last quick one. Yesterday in the statement, it mentioned that some time-critical programs had been halted. Can you just give us an example of what a time-critical program is?
Time-critical programs. I would say, for instance, you need to build shelters, right? And you need to understand, for instance, the number of the family. You need to understand the specific configuration and how to create the shelter for the winter time, okay? But if the assessment cannot go in the community, and the time sensitive means that winter is now, I mean, people are freezing, you know, but if the assessments cannot be done, and if the planning could not have happened, and if the program had been interrupted, obviously somebody is suffering in the snow. So this is one example of the time-sensitive program. Another of it would be installing the wash facilities. Another example could be bringing seeds. You know, we almost have finished this period, and I do hope that those activities continued, because I would hate to think that because of this, and we're still taking an inventory, someone couldn't get the water facility installed, or the seeds were not delivered on time to a community, so that in the next 4 months or 5 months there wouldn't be a harvest, and all these things. And all these things have a snowballing effect, because whatever you have done in a not time-sensitive manner today will result in harvest not being collected, let's say, 4 months later. So quite regrettable, and that's why we're working on resolution to these matters.
Okay, last question I'm going to take online, and then we'll wrap it up because we are very grateful that you've provided us all this time. Iftikhar Ali, please.
Thank you. Iftikhar Ali from Associated Press of Pakistan. My question has already been asked by Kristen and my colleague Edward, but Mr. Ramiz, you know Taliban very well. Is there any chance of them replacing or reversing the order of ban on women under pressure?
Thank you very much. I believe from my interaction with the Taliban, the best way of coming a solution is not a pressure, is a dialogue. This movement have not responded well to the pressure in the past, and this is from what the experiences I have. I also must say that in several instances when we had negotiations, we were able to make progress. So what I will be focusing on and what my team will be focusing on is on dialogue and on getting this issue resolved. And that is my priority.
Thank you.
And what is happening as the result of the actions taken without consideration of all the facts which I have outlined here is unfortunately nothing of our doing, but the results of the issuance of the ban, and as the results of all of these restrictions which are being imposed, and as a result of it taking place. We are working under one thing only, and that is resolution of the bottleneck and getting negotiations going so the women can go back to work and girls can go back to school, based on an understanding that this is an absolutely essential right of the people, and basing on the understanding that they, without it, neither economic life or the future of Afghanistan can be assured. And that's what we're pushing for.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alakbarov, and thank you so much for being so generous with your time. As you could tell, there are a lot of questions and a lot of interest, and thank you for all the work you're doing.
Thank you very much. And if I can just add one thing at the end of this conversation, be rest assured that United Nations, the humanitarian community, and all the partners in Afghanistan will always support gender equality, women's rights, and women's participation in all aspects of life, and specifically in the humanitarian action, and we will be working on finding solutions to this situation. Thank you for your attention and for having me today. Thank you so very much.